And we do that with people who are focused on this, who are focused on building thriving communities. So what is a thriving community? Well, first I'm going to define the kind of size of this problem we're focused on, that we're investing in. So right now there's 130 million people in the US that live in a rental community. 130 million Americans live in a rental community today. We want all of those 130 people to live a thriving community life, to live a life of fulfillment, to live fully, as we call it. Here's some of the problems that people face today who live in these communities. 50+% of them are cost burden, meaning they're spending too much in rent than they can afford, simply put. Which is why 61% are living paycheck to paycheck with no savings. 61% of Americans have zero savings and are living paycheck to paycheck, right? 61% of Americans, or maybe not 61%, but a large percentage of those 61% are one big medical bill, one big issue away from needing Lisa, an alpha omega, right? Being on the verge of homelessness, right? The average renter, because they can't afford housing, is the starting reason for this, move every 15 or 16 months because they can't afford their housing, so they're constantly moving, constantly going through change. 31% of renters in America are depressed. Think about that. So 16% of all Americans today are depressed, highest arguably in history, but 31% of renters. 50% self-say they are unhappy in their own surveys. They're unhappy with their life. 65% of all children, not just renters, 65% of all children in America today are reading below grade level. 72% of Americans are disengaged in their work, in their jobs. 84% of Americans say they're not connected to the local community they live in. And 90% or more, some of the stats say 94%, of renters are unchurched. Think about that. So most people who live in rental communities are not connected to a church community. Most people who live in a rental community aren't connected to the local community they live in. Most people who live in a rental community are not connected to their work or their company. Have you heard the loneliness crisis that we have today in America? Right? Lack of real connection. Right? We say that we invest in safe, attainable housing. Right? Safety doesn't come from the gates or patrol. It comes from relationship, from connection with your neighbors. Right? So these are the problems that we face in the average rental community across America today. A lack of connection, a lack of relationship, financial challenges, which is where a lot of this starts. And a lot of this is a bunch of problems underneath this, such as fatherless homes that lead to a lot of these problems as well, which we'll talk a bit about. So we want to invest in communities where people are living fully, have meaning in their lives, are part of a community, have deep relationships and connections, have opportunities for prosperity, right? Who doesn't want that, right? That's the American dream, right? Who doesn't want to be able to do so, to live fully, to be a part of a thriving community? That's what we aspire to do. And what we've developed is a framework of the 10 elements or ingredients of a thriving community that we try to bring to the communities we're invested in. And our real big effort is going to be bringing this to the 130 million residents out there, even the communities we don't own are invested in, and creating this as the framework of what's expected in rental communities, and changing the framework to how people operate these communities today, which benefits you as the investors in addition to benefiting the residents. So first, and where everything starts for us, is attainable housing. That's where it begins, housing that's affordable. If you can't afford your housing, it's hard to focus on everything else. So we need safe, attainable, affordable housing, right? Then people need access to banking, lending, investments. They need financial literacy. A big part of the reason people live paycheck to paycheck isn't always that they don't earn enough money, it's that they don't know how to manage their money, right? They don't have the literacy and education on how to save, how to manage. Bringing that kind of education. One of the big reasons we went into banking, one of the big reasons we own a bank is the ability to bring banking, lending, education to our residents. In order to be in a thriving community, you need jobs, you need companies, you need paychecks, you need ways for people to earn a living is a really important component. You need deep connections, relationships. This is really, really critical. The average American, they say 20 years ago, had 3 friends. Let me to guess the average number. Ever heard this? What the average number of friends each of us have today? 1. 1.5 is the. I don't know how the half works, but the average American has 1.5 friends, right? Most of them, that 1.5 friend doesn't live in the community they're in. So I think of it this way. I have 3 young children. If I had an emergency, if I lived in one of my rental communities and I had an emergency today, right? I had to go run out of town. I had to go, see a family member who was sick or something. I had to merge. It was 11 o'clock at night, and I've got to leave, and I got to go take care of something. Do I have somebody's door I could knock on that I could say, hey, I got to go. Can you please watch my kids? Right? Most do not. That's safety, is that kind of real relationship with your neighbors. Most do not. Education, right? Many of you have probably heard how incredibly important third grade literacy is, right? As one simple important factor that can lead to social mobility is third grade literacy. 65% of Americans are reading below grade level in third grade, right? Which plays such a big factor in what happens after that, right? The saying, from kindergarten to third grade, you read to learn, or you learn to read, and then fourth grade on, you read to learn, right? If you fall behind reading, then you start falling behind in life. One of the great reasons many of us live here in St. John County is it's by far the best schools in the state of Florida. It's not even close. 88% of children in this county read at grade level. Did you know that the next best county is 64%? That's the second best. Duval, I think, is 42% as an example. Family. Encouraging and promoting and helping families stay together, helping people have intentional families, helping people understand this pretty crazy stat here. I've known this stat now for maybe a year and a half, but it still amazes me. And this was done by a secular organization who went and said, hey, why do so many people get divorced? 50% or so of Americans get divorced now, right? Why do so many people get divorced? And they studied all kinds of things that you would think maybe would make the difference. Hey, do they go to church together? Things like that. All the things you would have normally thought would make a difference made almost zero difference. The one thing that made a real difference is couples that pray together. 99% of marriages where the husband and wife pray together, stay together, and don't get divorced. So if you learn one thing from tonight, go home and pray with your spouse. But that's really, really, really important. Yes. Government is really important, and spend a lot of time on that, but an important element of a thriving community. Access to healthcare, nutrition, education around healthcare and nutrition. Impact. And by impact, I'm talking about people serving other people, people feeling there's bigger value to their life than just themselves. And that's where we think of real success in our communities, when our neighbors are serving neighbors, right? It's great when we come in and we grant residents' dream, right? They had a hard thing come about and we pay their rent, right? Somebody has cancer and we come in there and give them free rent. Or somebody wants to go to college and one of their kids wants to go to college and we grant them tuition. When we as the owner do cool things like that, it's wonderful and it's great, and it's a great honor that we get to do those things. But what's even greater is when somebody in our community has cancer and is bedridden and the neighbors are serving, right? And they're taking turns coming and serving that neighbor. They're taking turns bringing food. That's when you have a thriving community. And then finally, as a believer, what I believe is the 10th important ingredient here is Jesus. People having a relationship with God. So we want to bring church, we want to bring discipleship to our communities. And no matter what your belief is, everybody in our communities needs grace and they need love, no matter what their beliefs are. But we want to create those opportunities for people to have real relationships. And we think if we focus on these 10 areas, actively bringing some of the best programming and organizations out there to help serve these residents, we can do some pretty amazing things. They say, so those in the church world, such as John Maxwell, who spent many years, probably a lot of you know him in the church world, he left the church world, being a minister in a church, to the secular world, to the business world, with a simple saying you may have heard before. In the church, you get people for an hour or two a week. Well, in the business world, we get people for 40 or 50 or 60 hours a week, right? Well, in our rental communities, we have people 7 days a week, right? Many of them are there 100 hours a week. We're literally living there with them. We get the ability to serve them in a really, really unique and special way. So our goal is to bring this focus around thriving community life to 1 million residents by 2030, 10 million residents by 2035, and 25 million residents by 2040. These are our goals. And this first slide is really important, obviously, for you in this room as investors. And how does this play into your investments with DLP? We've already been doing a lot of these things, and this is why we've been getting better returns. But people think that by loving on your residents, by taking care of them, that means you have to get lower returns. It's the complete wrong way of thinking, but that's how most of the industry thinks about it. And that's why they're running their properties in the wrong way, in my opinion. So we're going to prove, and we're building this out now to operators, to developers, to builders, to investors, that we can increase profits by doing the things I just talked about. Because we're going to have lower vacancy, higher occupancy. We're going to have lower delinquency because people can pay their rent. Because people can pay their rent and they love where they live, they're going to stay there longer, which means we're going to have lower turnover. Lower turnover means lower costs, lower maintenance costs. By people staying in community they love, they're going to refer their friends and their family and other people they know. They're going to put positive online reviews, which is going to lead to more people wanting to come there. It's going to increase the profits to residents. And then equally as important, it's going to improve the lives of our residents. So our first goal is residents serving residents, housing being affordable, our rents less than 25% of their incomes, flipping the stat on 16% of residents being connected with their local community to 84%, 80% of the children who live in our communities reading at grade level, 80% of our residents renewing their leases and staying, 80% of our residents involved in ongoing training, education, 80% of our residents having at least 2 friends in the community, 80% of our residents saying that they're happy, 80% of our residents being church, 50% of our residents part of a small group, whether that's a yoga group or a Bible study, whatever it is, part of community, 50% of our residents having at least 3 months of savings, not living paycheck to paycheck, and millions of people coming to salvation through this impact. Thank you.